Hi there Waltineers, I'm Jack and this is DSNY Newscast, and today what I want to talk about is a topic where there's been some level of speculation and rumours about for the last year or so, but the speculation has definitely increased as of recently, and so I thought this is something that we need to talk about at this point. So with that being said, what it's in relation to is the attraction Great Moments with Mr. Lincoln over at Disneyland. And I know how that sounds, but stick with me here. As you see, there was a permit that was filed recently for this attraction that, just quickly glancing at the permit, it looks like just a standard extensive refurbishment of a legacy attraction. But there are two parts of this permit which have definitely piqued my interest and I think are worth highlighting here. The first one is, within the permit description, they've stated that they're going to be replacing the existing platform and installing a new turntable. And for those unfamiliar with this attraction, basically the entire setup of this attraction is a stage show. So you've got the theatre setup, and then you've also got the stage where the animatronic figure of Lincoln gives his speech to the audience. And so for them to be replacing the existing platform and installing a new turntable, that's likely referring to work to be done to the way that the Lincoln figure is on stage. And so clearly this is changes to the overall mechanism of the show, as currently the way it works is the Lincoln figure, the animatronic, rises from his chair and then gives the speech to the audience. But for them to be installing a new turntable likely means that the Lincoln figure is going to be rotating into view of the audience and then giving his speech, which then poses the very interesting question of what could possibly be on the other side of that turntable for them to have to install a new turntable. So that's something that we should keep an eye out on, and it'll be something that I address in the rumour section of this video. But then the other thing I want to talk about is the overall permit valuation, the price tag for this refurbishment, and it's $5 million, which compared to brand new attractions, that's not a lot. But when you talk about refurbishments to existing attractions, $5 million is actually quite a substantial sum. And a good comparison here is that another legacy attraction in Snow White's Scary Adventure received a extensive refurbishment and a transformation into Snow White's Enchanted Wish a few years ago, and the permit for that work on that extensive refurbishment was listed as $445,000. So you can see where I'm going here, $500,000 compared to $5 million for the work that's been outlined in this permit. There's clearly something more happening, I think, to this whole permit for them to have such a large price tag. And obviously, that doesn't mean they're going to necessarily spend $5 million. That's the ceiling valuation of what the work will cost. But still, we're talking millions here for a refurbishment to the attraction. And with that being said, we now come to the rumour and speculation part of this video. As on forums, Discord servers, and on Diz Twitter as well, the rumour that has been floating around is that Imagineering is supposedly creating a Walt Disney animatronic. Now, much like all of you hearing that news right now, it sounds way too good to be true. It sounds unbelievable. And that was my initial reaction as well. But I think we need to discuss this in greater depth, as if it does end up coming to fruition and this rumour is accurate and they do end up making a Walt Disney animatronic, which is something which I've always wanted Disney to do, this will easily be one of the biggest things to ever happen to the Disney parks in terms of historical significance and the weight that it carries to have Walt Disney as an animatronic within the Disney parks. And the first thing we need to talk about here is the idea of a Walt Disney animatronic is actually one which Imagineering has considered in the past. As former Imagineer Eddie Soto, who did a lot of the Imagineering work on Disneyland Paris back when it opened, he went on a podcast back in 2009 and he stated that many years ago within Imagineering, they actually were working on a concept for a Walt Disney animatronic, and the way it would have worked is it would have been within the Great Moments with Mr. Lincoln attraction at Disneyland. And it would have acted as a sort of introduction to the attraction, the show in general. And it would have consisted of Walt sitting on the edge of his desk and introducing the audience to Lincoln, much in the same way that Walt used to introduce vignettes on the Disneyland TV show. So in many ways, maybe this is just a case of that old adage coming back around again, which is no good idea ever truly dies within Imagineering. And we might be able to see it revived or coincidentally revived in some way if this rumour turns out to be true. And that is a big if, but I would certainly love to see a Walt Disney animatronic within the Disney parks. As you know, I've even done a video on this in the past, an Armchair Imagineering video back in 2018 as my first Armchair Imagineering video, where I said the argument for a Walt Disney animatronic within the Disney parks. And my concept at the time was to put an animatronic of Walt Disney within the Carousel of Progress as an introduction to the Carousel of Progress, as after all, it is Walt Disney Presents the Carousel of Progress, and they could have done it for the 50th anniversary of Walt Disney World. But obviously, you know, that was just Armchair Imagineering, and we all know what happened with the 50th anniversary of Walt Disney World. But speaking of anniversaries, that actually brings us to the 100th anniversary of the Walt Disney Company. As last year for Disney100, the exhibition, we saw the hologram of Walt Disney. You know, it was announced and then unveiled that this Walt Disney hologram was kind of an introduction to the Disney100 exhibition that then toured the United States and around the world as well. And I'm guessing one of the big hurdles to doing a Walt Disney animatronic has always probably been getting the blessing of the Walt Disney family to use his likeness in this way. And so if they got the go-ahead for a hologram to be used in this way, then maybe they've been also given the go-ahead for a Walt Disney animatronic. It's not so far-fetched considering they've got the hologram that they've already done. And also, you know, this version of Disney is embracing heritage. It is now 100 years old, and clearly with that Walt Disney hologram, they're wanting to embrace Walt Disney and that direct line to the past and the founding of the company, with the founder of the company being Walt Disney, and having him be represented for a new generation to be in the presence of Walt Disney. And you know, I think it's great to see that this version of the Walt Disney Company is embracing its heritage and its history like this in such a way and honouring Walt's legacy. Now obviously there's always going to be talk of, would Walt have wanted to be an animatronic within the park and be a sort of character within the park? And in many ways, you know, Walt's argument, he felt very strongly that people of the 1960s and generations to come should be able to be in the presence of the great man of President Abraham Lincoln. And I think a similar argument could be made in the same way that this generation should be able to be in the presence of another great man in Walt Disney, whether it be in animatronic form or holographic form. I think it makes a lot of sense for this new generation to be able to be in the presence of Walt Disney once again. So I would love to see more Walt representation within the park like that. Now obviously this is just rumour about the animatronic, and let's say they aren't going to be doing an animatronic and it is the hologram. And that does kind of line up with this new turntable, because if they are installing a new turntable, then that could also be for this holographic version of Walt Disney within the attraction, as well as an introduction for the Great Moments with Mr. Lincoln attraction. So one way or the other, I think there's a lot of smoke where there's fire to this whole thing. And, you know, next year is the 70th anniversary of the Disneyland Resort, and that is, of course, Walt's park. And so it would make sense for, if they were to start it now with the refurbishment, and they were to unveil a Walt Disney either hologram or animatronic for the 70th anniversary of Disneyland, that would be a big draw for the resort for that main anniversary of 70 years of Disneyland. It would make a lot of sense for it to be going into the Great Moments with Mr. Lincoln and adding something to that attraction in terms of a Walt Disney animatronic or hologram. So either way, for them to be adding more Walt Disney to the parks is fantastic to see. I was glad to see them doing new Walt statues in terms of, obviously we've always had a partner statue since the 90s, but the new statue in Hong Kong Disneyland, and then we've also got the new Walt statue in Epcot, you know, for Dreamers Point as well. So they're clearly willing to embrace Walt as a character of legacy within the company, and I think it's a great thing for this generation to have that link to the past, to know where the Walt Disney Company started. Now, at this point in the video, usually I'd say it's over to you for Waltineers, but I just want to make a very quick point. You know, throughout this whole thing, I've been wearing this shirt that says Waltineers, and that's what you and I are. We're Waltineers. And what being a Waltineer is about, you know, embracing that optimism and that spirit of Walt Disney and keeping it alive. And I've always been a great admirer of Walt Disney all my life, you know, his contributions to the world. And, you know, I have the massive honour of being part of a History Channel documentary series that's currently airing on Sundays, and it's called How Disney Built America. And in actual fact, on June 2nd, they've got the final episode of the series coming out, and it's going to be on engineering marvels and Imagineering and stuff like that, and what Walt did with Imagineering. And so it's kind of comes full circle in many ways that, like, I had the honor to be in that episode on the History Channel talking about Walt Disney and, you know, the Waltineers and stuff like that. And now there is, you know, talk of having further Walt Disney representation within the parks, which I think is a massive plus no matter what, as it's good to remember who is the man behind the name of the company. So with that being said, it's over to you, Waltineers. I would like to know, what are your thoughts and opinions on this speculation and rumour today about this Walt Disney animatronic? Or would you like to see an animatronic? Would you like to see a hologram? What are your thoughts and opinions on the overall topic in general? And with that being said, be sure to subscribe down below, hit the notification bell so you never miss an update like this one today, and also check out the rest of the videos on the channel and give this video a massive thumbs up. And I'd also like to give a massive thank you to the official Waltineer Club over on Patreon, who are always, you know, supporting this channel. And I'd also like to give a big shout out to the Waltineer Gold tier members as well, that you can see here on the screen right now, along with Waltineer Diamond member Kyle Mahan. And with that being said for today, I've been Jack, you've been you, and I'll see you real soon.